Chris, I want to go back to July 12th, which was the longest month and 3 days ago, I think, of my life, because it feels like it was a year ago. And that was the night. It was a Saturday night, and we started to get word that this fire, this controlled burn on the North Rim, had started to get out of control. And it was the first time that we learned about the evacuation order on the North Rim. And suddenly North Rim employees were scrambling for the exits, so to speak, with almost no notice, 10 minutes in some cases, and forced to leave everything behind. That night we go to bed, wake up on July 13th, Sunday morning. I'll never forget it. I happened to be on the call that the park was having with their employees and with residents. And I sat there and listened as the superintendent, Ed Keeble, said, "We've lost the lodge." And I will never forget those words as long as I get. As long as I live. It was a visceral, emotional reaction that I had when I was like, the lodge is gone. I was just there 2 months ago. So I'm curious, just, you in Southern California, not as connected to the Grand Canyon community day to day, but this huge influencer in the hiking world. What was your reaction when you first heard the news?
The visceral reaction was, it felt like a gut punch. I was just like, whoa, what, it's just, like you said, it just happened so quickly. I'm a junkie on Watch Duty, the app, where you can monitor the fires, because there's so many fires. It affects my life directly as somebody who makes guides, needs to keep them updated. And, here in Southern California, I'd have a hard time naming you a hike that doesn't have some kind of fire damage on it. And I was watching, I saw it when it was small, it was contained. It was a little bit west of, the North Rim. Knowing that area, there's, it's just tons of pines and everything. But I was like, I guess this is going to be okay. They have containment set up. And then all of a sudden I woke up that morning and there were, a dozen text messages like, North Rim burned down. I have friends in the area and everything. North Rim's gone, or the North Rim Lodge is gone. And, that's when it just was like, oh, what just happens? And even just finding information about it right away, nobody really knew what was going on. I don't remember, but there wasn't really confirmation, I guess, until later that day. But it almost felt like a natural disaster that you were somehow involved with, and there's confusion, and you're not, you feel horrible for the people there. You're not sure what's going on. And it was just very uneasy and just devastating.
Why do you think that we had that visceral reaction to it? What is it about the North Rim that makes us have that kind of reaction?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's just, I'm lucky because I get to travel all over the country and see all these really beautiful areas, but there's something about the Grand Canyon that's just otherworldly, right? And then the North Rim is a whole different thing. And it's so remote and almost unspoiled, especially when you contrast it to like the South Rim, and it's just such a pristine and beautiful place. And just to see that devastated, and even the lodge, that lodge was my favorite lodge, hands down, out of all the parks. Not even close. The dining room there, I'd gone there many times with the wife. We would do some version of like the Great Circle. We'd do like Zion and North Rim and Utah, but we'd always stop there. We'd camp, that North Rim camping. And that was such a great, I don't know how much of that's left, but that was such a great campground too, because there were some spots there that were tent sites where you could see into the canyon. There are parts that are closer to like the general store where people had their RVs, but you could go a little bit farther and get these beautiful views, and there'd be, deer, mule deer walking through the camp. It was just otherworldly there. So it always had a special place. And I think the remoteness, helps too, because you really had to work to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
One way or the other.
Yeah. So if you went there in some way, whether you knew it before because you planned or because you got there and you figured it out, it was a special place.
It was one of those places where, being fortunate enough to live as close as I do, that I could be up there at the South Rim at 3.5 hours, and drop in on South Kaibab and, finish the day that started in the hustle and bustle of the big city and finish on the North Rim. And I would always tell people that, you know, when you make a decision on whether you're going to hike south to north or north to south, when you're doing rim to rim, the consensus seems to be that hiking north to south is easier. I don't really necessarily think it is, but even if it is, marginally more difficult to hike from south to north, it is so worth it to finish in the pines and in the quiet and the silence of the North Rim, the serenity. And even if you have to make that, 2-mile walk along the bridle path and end up at the lodge, right after that long hike, it's still like every step you take toward the lodge is a step back in time, or to a simpler time, right? And then you step into the lodge and everything just melts away, and to your point, to the dining room, even when you would walk into the lodge and it's the old school check-in desk, right? With the keys behind the desk there. And it just, it never stopped. It was like everything was frozen in time. Is that the sense that you got?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the isolation. I think, it wasn't, it was, there's not a ton of people. You really just have to want to get there to be there. And it just feels, because there's no developments, and you have the log cabins and all these, you put it nicely. It just felt like a different world. And I'm with you. I recommend going, or did recommend going south to north, because going north to south, I think, is a little bit tougher as well, just because you have that more exposed hot section between Phantom Ranch and Havasupai Garden. But also to get up to the Bright Angel Trail after doing a 24-mile day, and there's, people with ice cream cones and Bluetooth speakers. For me, that was soul crushing. I just needed to get in the car and go sit in a hotel room and get away from that, or have a beer. If I could even get into like the bar at the whatever it was, either the El Tovar or the Bright Angel there. But the North Rim, like you said, you just got there, and you had that extra 2 miles to walk down the bridle path. But it was you felt good. You knew if you did south and north that bridle path was just nothing. You could just kind of enjoy it. So sort of like a victory lap.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of looking at it. What do you hope to see? You've been to other lodges at other national parks. It's 3 years from now, it's 5 years from now. What in a perfect world do you hope to see happen to the lodge and to the lodge area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hope they rebuild it. I hope it's as much as it was originally. Obviously, like to see some things modernized, but
Like
overall, like, and this might be just a systems thing, but I remember walking down that bridle path and feeling really good, and then waiting like an hour in line for the check-in desk because
that can happen.
Yeah, but just some small things like that. But I think you need to keep that dining room. I think it needs to be very close to the way it was. Now, whether that happens or not, I have no idea. You would obviously know much better than I would about what the rumblings are about what's going to happen next. But for me, I'd want it to be as close to it was originally.
The only thing I would add to that is I would say, yes, build it back as close as it was, but add Wi-Fi, and I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And I know that's unpopular to a lot of people, but I'm always like, hey, you can choose to not use the Wi-Fi. If you don't have Wi-Fi, I can't make that choice. So,
or give me the choice. Yeah. Like the TVs too, right?
Give me the choice.
There's no TVs. That's some people love it. Some people, I've heard people complain about that.
Yeah. But we're always going to find something to complain about. We're human, man. Right?
Exactly.
So I'm curious, because obviously rim to rim is a lot of what this podcast is built around. It's a lot of what our business is built around. It's a lot of what a lot of people's businesses is built around. And now, we're going to lose that for who knows how long. But I think it's safe to say it's going to be years before we can, access the North Rim from the South Rim again. Looking at the fire maps and looking at the perimeters and not knowing for sure, because there is still not a lot of information. The Park Service is choosing to really not talk about much. And the fire people just reached back out to me a little while ago, and because I had inquired about the condition of North Kaibab from Supai Tunnel to the trailhead, and they said they just don't have that information. So we're all curious about how intensely that burned, how much damage there is, We're, of course, going to be worried about flash floods and the winter runoff and all that stuff. So who knows how long it's going to be before rim to rim is accessible again. Knowing that we have so many people in our community who are laser focused on rim to rim and have now lost that opportunity, not just for this year. I feel so bad for the people who are getting ready for September, October before the North Rim traditionally closes, but now for years to come, let's say 2026, 2027, at least, I would say. So
Yeah.
are there bucket list hikes around? Obviously there are. You would know this much better than I would. What would you have people, I don't know, transition to? Is it Cactus to Clouds? Is it Whitney? What is out there that is a bucket list hike that's similar to Rim that people might consider, pivoting to if they're not going to just stay in and do the canyon?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. There's nothing like the Grand Canyon, not just the down up, but just, I, I was, after this happened, I was looking for an answer to that question. I was looking at, Escalante and Canyonlands and different places. And there's nothing quite like this. The fact it's such a great mix of wilderness and also a developed trail with water. There's a lot of help along the way, and to do something like that, say in Canyonlands, would be a much different exercise that I would not recommend to somebody who wasn't experienced and willing to carry like 6 liters of water for 2 days or whatever. Having said that, if I would say if people are going to the Grand Canyon South Rim anyway, and the trails are open, I think doing a rim to river, South Kaibab to Phantom, and then back up Bright Angel is probably as close to that experience as you're going to get, at least like you said, for several years. I love that hike too. I love that hike. And that'll give you a taste for what you're missing. You're not going to get the North Rim, but if you've never been there before, you don't know what you don't know. So you'll still get to see rock that's almost 2 billion years old. The Vishnu schist, and you'll still get that kind of experience. Outside of that, I have a lot of people in my community who do other bucket lists. Mount Whitney, as you mentioned, is a big one. Looking at about just under 22 miles, about just under 7,000 feet of climbing. It's got a short window. This is the time to do it in the fall right now. You need a permit to do it, which was one of the nice things about rim to rim is you could just do it. The lodging was the challenge, obviously. But for Whitney, you need a permit. You could snag a last minute permit. There's not heat there, but there is altitude. That's a consideration, but that's a big one. Cactus to Cloud, you mentioned, that's actually a lot harder, I think, for a lot of people than rim to rim. It's a similar distance. It's like about 21, 22 miles, but you have 10,000 feet of climbing. The windows to do that are similar to Grand Canyon. There's the spring and the fall window. But if it's, people have died on that who didn't do it the right time because of the heat exposure. But that's a fun one. Starts at Palm Springs in the Sonoran Desert, and then you climb up Mount San Jacinto. You basically go from, cacti in the desert up to pine trees on the summit of this mountain. Beautiful hike, but it is tough, and you do have some bailout points. You don't have to go all the way up there, but that's an option. That might be more for somebody who's done rim to rim and maybe was going to do it again. I think on the East Coast, the one I really like is the Presidential Traverse up in the White Mountains. It's a hike, goes to Mount Washington and all the presidentials, as they call them. It's a point-to-point hike. That's, I think, around 19 miles, got 8,000 feet of climbing, so a little more climbing, lots of ups and downs. But that's a good one if you just don't want to travel out west, if you're on the East Coast and you just want to, do something with the fitness that you might have been building up over the years. Another one I forgot. You can take the west if you're going to be out there. If you're going to be at West, and maybe you're going to be at Zion, you could do the West Rim Trail. You used to be able to do the whole traverse in Zion from West Rim, and then up the other side. But the East Rim Trail is closed indefinitely up from the lodge. But you can do the traverse, which, don't quote me, but I think it's around 30 miles or so. But that would be a good one, long maybe for a day hike. But those would be the big ones. And then if you want to do overnights, if you're planning on doing a rim to rim with maybe a couple stops along the way, then you have a lot more options. If you want to do something similar, some good ones are Timberline Trail around Mount Hood. No permit, no quota permit required. You just have a permit that you fill out when you get to the trailhead. That's a beautiful, beautiful hike. We're looking at about 42 miles, about 10,000 feet. That's a lot of ups and downs. But if you have that fitness and you want to go do a, overnight, Timberline is great. Teton Crest Trail is a great one, and Grand Teton National Park. We're looking at about 40 miles, about 9K of climbing. That one, if you want to camp in the park, you need a permit. But the nice thing about that is on the Teton Crest Trail, part of it goes through or right next to the National Forest. So there's a little hack where you could just hop into the National Forest and camp without needing any kind of national park quota, or campsite reservation. So there's options. If you have the fitness and you want to use that fitness, do a tough one. And if not, and you have the time off, do something a little bit easier. Go up to the Olympics, maybe. There's Ho River Trail, the Enchantments. Those are ones that have 3,000 feet of climbing. So you can go if you've been stressing because you're not used to climbing 5,000 feet in a day, go and do something the same distance, not so much climbing, and enjoy it. But lots of options out there. And I would just say, don't not do anything. Do something with the planning. You have the time to hike, you have the fitness, use it, because you don't know when things will change other places.
I mean, those are such great options, but it listening to you also makes me just go back to what you said originally. There's nothing like the canyon. There's just nothing. There's a reason why it's probably the number one bucket list hike in the world. And it, to your point, that was a great point, that it's so accessible when it comes to the help that you have along the way. It can still feel like a rugged, difficult, physical journey, but at the same time, the infrastructure that the National Park Service provides along the way does give you certainly some advantages. And to your point about rim to river, this is a big thing in our group when people will say, "Oh, I'm just going to do a rim to river. It's just a rim to river." Take that just right on out of there, right? I mean, we're talking about a hike that I always say that use that as like your last progression before doing rim to rim, because if you can handle rim to river, you can handle rim to rim, because they are just about the same thing outside of, a few more miles of flattish hiking.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's such a great hike. It's hard, especially, I mean, the temperature has a lot to do with it, but I've done that with ice and snow up at the top of the South Rim. I've done that when it's a little bit warmer. It's a tough hike, no matter which way you slice and dice it. And, there's a reason why every piece of National Park Service, literature says don't do the hike to the river and back in a day, aimed at beginners, because it's I'm sure they've had so many rescues from people doing that. And I'm sure you've seen, the person at the bottom wearing Vans and having a school, backpack on. You're like, oh God,
every time.
Hope this guy makes it out. Yeah. But I think you live in this world more than I do, but there's people who are really into the Grand Canyon, and that a rim to river is like too commercial, too mainstream for them. They would tell you like, go Hermits or go to the Tanner Trail and connect on this and that. And I think if you're new to the Grand Canyon and rim to rim was your big bucket list hike and the thing that you were going to do, there's nothing wrong with the rim to river. And it's a challenging hike. And if you feel like the distance isn't as long, go walk another 5 miles in the South Rim to make yourself feel better. But I'm pretty sure you're not going to feel that.
Well, yeah, when push comes to shove, no one's going to actually do that. You might think that, I'm going to add some more miles to this thing to make it longer. When you step foot on the surface of the South Rim after you finish that, you're not going to feel like doing any more miles. I can almost promise you that.
No, there's one time, I think it was the second time I did that many moons ago. I remember going to that bar. What do you know what it is? Is it the El Tovar or the Bright Angel? That small bar at the lodge right there. I guess it's
either
the
one.
Bright Angel. Yeah, and having a beer right after doing that, and then like finding myself falling asleep sitting at the bar stool because I was just so wiped out. So don't underestimate that.
Do you have any guides for any of the off corridor trails in the canyon?
Yeah, I have Hermit Trail to Dripping Spring, also the little house at Santa Maria Spring. I have Grandview. I have I have a couple other ones. I can't quote them all now. And you know, I'd also say if you're going to go do the Grand Canyon hike for the first time, and this was going to be it, now you can't do rim to rim, do the corridor trails. Don't do Grandview. So somebody's missing on Grandview. Like that's a hardcore. I mean, that's a hardcore trail. Hermit, not so much, but the farther you go, it gets a little more primitive. Let's stick to the corridor trails because they're just so well maintained that there's no ambiguity about where to go, really. They're well marked, and you're going to see other people. So if you get in trouble and you don't have like a satellite communicator or something, it's not too tough to ask for help.
I think that's great advice, man. Yeah, I don't even like venturing off the corridor trails unless I'm with someone who's been, out there before and knows what they're doing, just to have that security. So I think that's
Yeah.
a great point. And again, it comes back to people not sleeping on Rim to River. Don't sleep on Rim to River. It is still a bucket list hike, and you're still going to get the full Grand Canyon experience. You mentioned earlier that there are so many trails in Southern California that have been affected by fire damage. So with that kind of knowledge that you have and not knowing yet the specifics, because we're still in August, the fire's 56% contained as of this morning, 145,000 acres. But we know there's damage. We know there's flash flood risks, significant flash flood risks, and especially through Bright Angel Canyon all the way to Phantom along Bright Angel Creek. But knowing what you know about fire damage on trails, what would you speculate that the future looks like for North Kaibab?
Probably a closure 4 years, somewhere maybe between 2 and 5.
Total
But
closure, knowing the trail, total closure, or just near the top?
that's a good question. I don't know. Here's what I think is going to happen. There's a lot of fuel at the top, past Supai Tunnel to the trailhead on North Kaibab. If that all went up, those switchbacks are going to erode. Um, I don't know if any of the reinforcement burned on the trail, like any of those boards that reinforce the switchbacks. Assuming that's gone, it's all burned and there's no trees or vegetation there to hold that in. I would imagine that would wash away. A lot of those switchbacks would wash away. It's a good point you made about flash floods going down into the canyon. I didn't even really go into that train of thought too high, but I'd imagine they're knowing the government, knowing the Park Service, I imagine they would keep as much of it closed for as long as possible. If there was any iota that it would be a risk to people because of those conditions, because of the burn damage. Even when they fix the trail, we still have to think about the facilities on the North Rim, right? It looks like the Kaibab Lodge, which is, I don't know, 20 miles or so north of the trailhead there, survived. So there might be lodging opportunities if the trail opens. I'm thinking it's going to be a long, long time before the actual North Rim Lodge opens. So I'm not sure how that's all going to shake out. But I would say the trail, I wouldn't be surprised if it's closed 5 years.
Yeah.
Until it opens back up.
And we're just thinking out loud here, Chris, and kind of gaming this out because we don't have all the information yet. It just is from experience and looking at the maps and just, kind of speculating. But, I want everyone to know that I was speaking with some very, very in the know people at the Grand Canyon this weekend. And to your point about, you hadn't really let your train of thought go to the flooding aspect of this yet. I hadn't either.
Yeah.
Because you're just worried about what's right in front of you. You're not thinking about the long-term effects necessarily. But these folks that I talked to over the weekend, they're like, what's going to stop a flood through Bright Angel Canyon, down Bright Angel Creek, all the way through the box from getting through there at a ferocity we've never seen before because of the burn scars? And what's going to stop that from wiping out Phantom Ranch and wiping out Bright Angel Campground and potentially wiping out the new wastewater treatment plant that's right there on the bank of the Colorado? What's going to stop it? That's the fear that these people who know these things have. So us sitting here and wondering when North Kaibab is going to be reopened. Last week I was saying, well, maybe worst case scenario, they'll open it to Redwall Bridge at some point in the next year. Because I think the part above Redwall Bridge is just going to be, to your point, what you were talking about, it's just going to get wiped out.
Yeah.
by erosion and by the winter runoff, and if not by monsoons and flash floods. So I don't know if, knowing what we know, and to your point again about NPS taking a cautionary approach and the liability that they have, and who knows what's coming from above. And then you've got the box, which is 4.5 miles of narrow slot canyon between Phantom and, the frying pan area where everything finally opens up. Talk about the liability in there, because if someone gets caught in there and there's a flash flood coming, where are you going to go? Right?
Yeah.
So, man, we might be looking at years and years and years when you really break this all down.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's such a good point, right? Like, how are you going to get people out of the box, right? That couple miles in there, there's no helicopters going to come in. They're not going to hoist anyone out. And I mean, you saw when this all happened and they had the evacuations at Phantom Ranch because of the chlorine, it was a major operation. They had helicopters getting all these people out. Imagine a flood is coming down Bright Angel Canyon, and people have minutes. People, I mean, you can just go on YouTube and find videos of Zion Canyon when there's flooding. There's times when the entire Zion Canyon is just covered and there's cars moving down the road and out of the parking lots and stuff. So yeah, I would imagine I it'll be interesting to see what happens, and I'll be interested to listen to your podcast for your information moving forward, because a lot of the damage that's going to happen on the upper canyons there is going to determine how long that's all closed. And if you use the South Rim closures that we have still South Kaibab, you can't go below Havasupai Garden. It's pretty long. I think that chlorine risk is out of there. I think they're just, in an abundance of caution, they just keep that closed. They just would rather not have you on there to deal with another emergency when there's all these other things going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if, South Rim is closed for a long time and North Rim is closed for a long, long time.
Well, as of this morning, and I want to read this because, again, this is still a bit of a breaking news story because the fire is still burning. And let me just read this to everyone, because in the past couple of days, we haven't even talked about Roaring Springs, which provides the drinking water, not just for the North Rim, but for the South Rim as well. So an incredibly valuable asset that needs to be protected. And as of the lodge going up, they were talking almost immediately after the fire teams were about preventative measures and protective measures that they were going to take at the Roaring Springs pump house. And Chris, you know as well as I do how deep that is in the canyon and how unfathomable it is to even think that a fire that starts on the North Rim can get all the way down there. That was 4 or 5 weeks ago. Yeah. As of a couple of days ago, they were talking in the briefing again about Roaring Springs as this fire has dove deeper into the canyon. And so I reached out and asked for help, asked for what was going on with Roaring Springs, because you don't get necessarily specific answers in the briefings that they give. They're very general, and there's no opportunity to ask questions. So what they said to me was, they said, Roaring Springs is one of the values at risk that has been identified by the agencies. The reason we keep mentioning it is because firefighters are still taking active measures to protect it. The fire has not moved right to that area, but we continue to stay prepared in the event that it does. So even after all this time, and even with the fire burning a pretty good distance away from where Roaring Springs is, but above it, I mean, they're not taking any chances. How mind-blowing is that to think about Roaring Springs, as deep as it is in the canyon, still being a threat all these weeks later?
It's amazing. And I don't know if you saw, it was probably a week ago, I guess the winds shifted and that area started burning again. I was looking at the satellite hotspots and it was going downhill, which you don't see a whole lot, right? Because it's hot, it goes up, but it was going downhill. And there's a new, if you look at the official perimeter from I think a week ago or so, there's new trail damage or burn damage down to the old Bright Angel Trail, the one that went up from Roaring Springs there. So I think they're worried that if the wind shifts again, it gets dry, it could just, and in the canyon or any canyon, there's like microclimates and there's winds funneling down canyons in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I could see that happening there and just getting pushed down, the canyon, because Roaring Springs is in a canyon, it's Bright Angel Canyon. I think if that were to go, obviously that would be a huge deal, just because, the spring will be there, but I think there's a small pump there. I think the pipeline to the North Rim, I'm not sure what happened with that because that wasn't part of the pipeline rehabilitation going from the North Rim to Roaring Springs. I'm not sure what the temperature that pipe would maybe melt at. Like, who even knows if they're going to be able to get water from there? But even downstream, like you said, it's going to be, who knows what contaminants are going to go into the water. I saw on the news and on one of your local Phoenix news stations last week that they're going to do a study on the water because of the runoff from different maybe chemicals or fire retardant or just ash and sediment in there. But it has such a potential major impact on the entire Grand Canyon, that Roaring Springs area. That I get it. I get why they told you that, because it's huge. If that goes down, a lot goes down.
Yeah, and it's been hard to watch. The media, the national media especially, just kind of lose interest. After the lodge burned down,
Yeah.
no one died, no one's hurt, so they kind of move on to the next story. And I'll still hear reports in the morning where they'll give an update on the Dragon Bravo fire burning on the North Rim. They always say on the North Rim.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I hate to tell you, but this thing has gone over 4,000 vertical feet below the rim at this point in some places, in two places, on the east and the west side of the fire. And they're still having a lot of problems with it on the east side, where it has gotten within a mile of the Colorado. I mean, it's just unfathomable. So vast swaths of the canyon are burning. The Grand Canyon, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, is burning right now. And it seems like the world's attention has just moved on to the next political outrage. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's been frustrating to watch it. The other thing is everyone's always looking at the containment percentage. Oh, it went up, it went down, where it doesn't tell the whole story. And if you look at that eastern part, which, as knowing the area, there's nothing there. I mean, there's some trails, some Forest Service roads. I mean, that area is really remote, and that if that whole area goes up, I mean, that would have a huge effect just on the whole ecosystem. I'd imagine, part of that whole North Rim kind of continuum that goes on. But also, if you look how far it's gone to the north, it's almost joined up with the perimeter of the White Sage fire.
Yeah, right.
I mean, when the when it was first happening, no one thought the North Rim Lodge would burn. And then I remember watching briefings after the North Rim Lodge burned, and they were saying, "Oh, we don't think the Kaibab Lodge is in danger. That's the one that's 20 miles north."
Yeah.
And then they have to put, they saved it, thank God.
It was across
and now
the
it's
street.
almost, yeah. The pictures, if you haven't seen them, they're on their Facebook page, but they have these amazing pictures. And now it's, almost up to the White Sage fire. I mean, it's just, I think to your point about like people moving on, I think the NPS has done a poor job at sharing this with the public. I think it would behoove them to get the public on their side in the short term and on the long term. They did this really great. I'm sure everyone saw it now, but the helicopter flyover of the lodge, they really need more of that so that the world understands what's happening, because it's not just awareness now, but it's going to need to be in people's minds when later they're rebuilding it. And there's going to be, charities, or maybe there's going to be things for businesses that are going to go out of business because everything is gone, like, as but like on the North Rim specifically, not that there was a whole lot up there, but, this is going to affect everybody. And I don't see how it benefits the Park Service to not release more footage and keep it fresh in people's minds.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and you've kind of opened the door for me, and I'm gonna push it open. You've given me the opportunity to, so I appreciate that, Chris. Listen, the job that has been done by Superintendent Ed Keeble has been horrific, and it's outrageous, and it's wrong. And the fact that he has not been out front publicly a single time, to my knowledge, on camera, speaking about this, showing empathy, showing remorse for the decision that was made, that, by the way, would be a lot more understandable and people would forgive much more. They might forgive it if someone's out and speaking to it and taking accountability. Instead, the philosophy seems to be that they're just going to hide, and they're just not going to say anything and pretend that nothing happened. And they know that they're going to face the music at some point. But to your point about standing up and showing accountability and getting in front of it and starting to create their own narrative about this situation and getting some public sympathy and understanding only behooves them. Doing what they're doing and hiding makes it a million times worse. And I think it's an outrage that last week there were 2 public meetings, one in Fredonia and one in Page, where the public was out there, the fire crews were out there, the leadership from all these agencies are out there, and the National Park Service, Grand Canyon National Park, sent a liaison who had been on scene. He was from another park, and he had been on scene for 8 days. And the questions that he was getting, he wasn't able to answer because he didn't have the historical knowledge of what had happened over the previous month. And the poor people from the North Rim who have been displaced, who are standing there saying, we aren't getting answers. When can we go back and know what happened to our homes? When can we go retrieve our belongings? No one is talking to us. And there's no one there who can represent the Park Service or Grand Canyon National Park and answer these poor people's questions who have been affected. I find it absolutely outrageous, and I think it's a dereliction of duty. I think it's a failure of leadership, and it starts at the top. I don't blame the people below Ed Keeble. They are following directions, following orders. They have jobs to do. I understand that completely. But where is the superintendent? This is the biggest tragedy in the history of Grand Canyon when it comes to land loss, and he's nowhere to be seen. And it's an outrage. So, yeah. Chris, thank you for giving me the opportunity to walk through that door. I told you I was going to kick it down, man.
I'm glad you said it. I mean, I'm with you 100%. And unfortunately, I've seen this type of thing when we've had fires here in Southern California too. Like, it depends on the fire, but sometimes, people don't know, when can I go back? Who do I call?
Right.
It's just confusion. You'd think today, we can land spaceships, SpaceX rockets can go into space and come back down and land on platforms. People have been to the moon. You think we could figure out a more structured or a more effective framework for dealing with natural disasters and emergencies. I know everyone's different, but there's got to be best practices here that, obviously a lot of it's at the discretion of the people who are in charge, but there should just be some norms and standards, because this is, you just feel let down by the people who are supposed to be protecting the places you love.
It doesn't even have to be best practices. It can be common sense and common decency, right? Yeah. To do these things, right? Just the very basics, right? I know. And personally, I'm outraged by this. I reached out to the Park Service on 3 separate occasions, asking questions about North Kaibab, asking questions about other things, asking if we're going to be able to actually ask questions to people so that we can get answers, right? Yeah. Because this is, we have a large platform for the Grand Canyon. They know who we are. They know damn well who the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show is. Trust me on that. And they didn't even bother responding to the inquiries that I put out there. Not a no comment, not a we don't know, nothing. Just completely ignored. And I just find it outrageous. That's a slap in the face, not to me, but to our entire community, the public, who they are supposed to be serving. And again, I blame Ed Keeble for that. He's the one who is putting these mandates out there to not talk. It's obvious. And if that's not the case, NPS, come out and say something. Talk. Let's hear it. Tell us what the real story is. This is just an outrage.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, especially there's so many stakeholders, there's so many businesses like yours that are all tied into this situation, and to keep you guys out of the dark, in the dark about this is just, like you said, it's just, it's unacceptable, unconscionable. I don't understand, but everyone is decent and has common sense. And
here's the problem,
honorable,
right? Yeah. Here's the problem. It's a classic case. And again, I'm going to say this because it's my opinion, but it's also from a lifetime in the media and in journalism. It's obvious that it's a cover your ass kind of thing, right? Because when it comes down to it, if this had been a natural fire that did not have a contain and control strategy placed on it by the decision makers at the Park Service, they would be out front of it, out in front, and they would be doing all the things we said. But the bottom line in this situation and it needs to be known. And we are not going to sit here and cast blame on people, because people do make mistakes, and we have empathy for that. But when you don't talk, it leads to me saying things like this, right? Which is the ultimate decision maker per NPS regulations, NPS fire regulations, who has to sign off on a controlled burn, a naturally caused fire like this one was. It started on July 4th on the North Rim, caused by lightning, and they decided to do a contain and confine strategy, not a full suppression strategy. That needs to be signed off on, because what if things go wrong, right? They have a hierarchy. They have they have protocol they have to follow. Ed Keeble, the superintendent of Grand Canyon National Park, is required to be the one who signs off on that. So it makes a little bit more sense of why you're not hearing anything from Grand Canyon National Park when you have that information.
It's just so disappointing on a lot of levels. I think a lot of us these days are disappointed with a lot of things that are happening on public lands and some of the choices. And, this is just all part of it. There's not a head of the National Park Service, confirmed by the Senate. There hasn't been for a long time. They're just acting people. I think, once I can echo what you said about, there's two levels of people working in public lands in the Park Service. There's like the boots of the ground. There's the lower level people who are taking orders and doing their best. And then you get up to a certain level and it gets very political, and it's all about CYA. And it's sad, for people who love the outdoors. That's just not a good situation.
We could talk forever, Chris. I'm so grateful that you came on, and I'm kind of sorry, but kind of not, that you opened that door for me to say what I wanted to say. It's just been pent up and built up inside me. I have to say something, because I feel like if you don't challenge authority, nothing will ever change, right? And public and accountability and transparency from public agencies, I just don't have a tolerance for when they ignore that, and they forget that not only do they work for the public, they are the public, and they have a duty to keep us informed with at least basic information. But to wrap this whole thing up, we're a hiking show, and this is about people building up for a bucket list iconic adventure. They can't do rim to rim anymore. Just give me 1 minute and talk about why someone should still, despite all of this, come to the Grand Canyon and just pivot to rim to river or something like that. You're the hiking guy. Sell them. Come on, Chris.
Here's the deal. I get to go to do hikes all over the country, all over the world. The best hikes. I was just up in the Olympics. I've been all over. And there's a reason why I go back to the Grand Canyon every year. I go every year and hike the Grand Canyon because there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else. Like I mentioned earlier, you go to the bottom, there's stone that's like 2 billion years old. I think the earth is like just under 5 billion years old. Like it just blows my mind. It's such a beautiful hike, and there's nothing else like it. So if you have plans and you're going to do rim to rim, go South Rim, support the local businesses there. I'm sure everyone needs the help at this point. And do rim to river. And if the conditions aren't bad, go do the rim trail. Or, if it's too hot to do rim to river, do all 13 miles of the rim trail. It's still beautiful. There's so many great places to hike there. And you'd be a fool to miss out on that just because all of this is happening on the North Rim.
And the two big things on top of that I'll just add is, number one, you can do it any time of the year. Whereas rim to rim is limited from May to October. You can do it any time of the year. And that's especially important because now you can do it in the best times of the year, which would be November, into December, and then in the springtime as well. So you can avoid the heat, which we talk about ad nauseum here about the dangers of hiking the canyon in the heat. You can avoid that altogether. Rim to river's it, man. I agree with everything you said, Chris.
And winter and the Grand Canyon, if you didn't know, there's snow on the South Rim sometimes, and it's beautiful. It's you wouldn't even expect it. People have an image of the Grand Canyon. It's sort of like Wile E. Coyote desert kind of place. It's not like that. The snow there. It's absolutely beautiful. Like you said, you don't have to go when the heat is a problem, and that's what gets most people, as you know, into trouble is the heat. So go in the winter, and if it is too hot, do the rim trail, and you'd be good. You'll be golden.
And better to be too cold than too hot when you're hiking into the inner canyon. I mean, the worst case scenario is you're going to have some micro spikes you'll have to put on for the first mile down or so,
Yeah.
maybe longer, but it's going to get nicer and nicer as you get lower and lower. That's the beauty of hiking into a canyon. It's the best
Yep.
plan. Thank you so much for your time, man. It was an honor for us to have you on. Again, I apologize for going off the rails a little bit there
No.
with some obviously very pent up emotions about how this thing is being handled by Ed Keeble and Grand Canyon National Park. But thank you so much for your time. It was an honor, and we'll be sending people your way as always. You're a gift to the hiking community in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure. This went by. It felt like 2 seconds. I could talk hiking in Grand Canyon with you, till sundown. So thank you so much for having me on.